Work optionality is the idea that you work because you want to, not because you have to. As you're listening to this in your 20s, this concept might seem like a pipe dream. That's honestly fair. Most of us don't have this luxury. We are building wealth along with just paying the bills, and it takes income to do that. But this idea might not be as far away as you think. Regardless of your timeline, as your wealth grows, even before you hit financial independence, I think you should be inching closer to a life designed by you, not by your employer or clients. This might include changing your hours, taking more time off of work, participating in mini retirements, pivoting careers, or starting a business. This is an idea that Rachael Camp, founder of Camp Wealth, is routinely discussing both online and with her clients. And I asked her to come on the podcast to do the same. Rachael is a financial planner who helps young professionals maximize money for financial freedom. She's also redesigned her life over the last few years and told me it is feeling way more aligned. In this episode, we break down the nuance between traditional FIRE and work optionality. Rachael shares steps you can take to start progressing towards a work optional life, and she shares questions to ask yourself to uncover what life like that would truly look like. Also, at the end of the episode, I asked Rachael to break down some of her most popular tweets from the last month. This is a really fun, wide-ranging conversation, and as you can probably tell, I had a blast getting to know Rachael. So if you're ready to do the same, let's get into it. I hope you enjoy my conversation with the former Hoosier turned Denverite, Rachael Camp. You know those moments where you think, I wish I would have learned this in school? Those are the topics that we love to talk about. Join me each week as I interview experts sharing their strategies for solving problems that us young adults will face throughout our 20s and 30s. So what are you waiting for? If you want new episodes about adulting advice every Monday, hit that follow button. Well, Rachael, excited to have you on the podcast. I feel like we could have a wide-ranging conversation about a lot of personal finance topics. And of course, like going through your Twitter too, I'm just like, oh, that would be a fun topic. Oh, that would be another good topic. And then hearing you on your podcast and on other podcasts, like I wrote a ton of different things. But I think the thing that resonated with me the most and what I want to spend at least the first half of this conversation about is work optionality, which I feel like is like another, I don't know, sub avenue of FIRE. Like I'm not quite exactly sure like where you slate it into the FIRE movement, but maybe we start there. What do you feel like is the difference between traditional FIRE and work optionality, or at least the difference that you're trying to convey through your podcast and Twitter and all of your content?
Yeah, the origin of work optional and why I started talking about it so much kind of comes from two sources. One of them is my clients. So I started talking to clients, pretty much asking them, what about retirement? Do we have an age in mind? Do we have a idea of what that would look like? And I could probably count on one hand the amount of people who had an idea of traditional retirement. Everybody was saying the same thing. Like, I want to hit that freedom number, but I don't really want to stop working. I think maybe I would just try to do something else. Some of them maybe use the words work optional, but I used to ask them, okay, so it's more of a question of, do you want to be work optional? And they would always grab onto that and say, yes, that's exactly it. So that was a big inspiration for me starting to talk about it. But also just personally, I went through that transition where I found the FIRE movement in my early 20s, working at a job I really didn't like. And that was kind of a goal that made that job a little bit more manageable. Just the idea of, well, I can get to financial freedom in X amount of years and then I can retire early, until eventually I realized the way I remember things, I like working. So it's more of a question of, is this the right job for me? And if it's not, rather than going to early retirement and then stopping and not doing anything, how can I start to think about a career where it's more of my dream career and more of something that I enjoy doing and something I don't want to retire from? So those two sources of my clients are saying this over and over again. Nobody wants traditional retirement. But then the FIRE movement, which gave an alternative to traditional retirement and basically said, what if we just move retirement way up? That wasn't attractive to me either. And also when looking at that time horizon, of saving aggressively, it was still like age, 45, 49, maybe, that I could hit that financial freedom. And to me, being 23 and thinking through, this is the next few decades of my life where I'm going to be working towards this and then I'll be happy, that was not an attractive option either. So that's where work optional came in and kind of provided this small tweak, but really important tweak to this movement of not retiring at some point, but becoming work optional and money losing its value eventually.
Yeah, I think your pinned tweet summarizes it or like encapsulates it so well, which is my goal is not to retire. My goal is to own my days and choose the projects I want to work on. My goal is to work from a mindset of impact, not money. And I really like that. I think it did a really great job. I don't know, do you think that progressing towards FIRE and also exploring careers that more align with what fills your cup or is the impact that you want to make or just like gets you a little bit more excited to wake up every day, do you feel like they can be in congruence? Like, can I be working towards both of them in essence?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I still have this goal of hitting, the work optional status to where I don't need a paycheck or I don't need revenue or however you want to label it. I don't need money anymore. But I also don't care to retire. So it's very interesting because you think that these two things don't go together well. It's a matter of how important is money and how much are we relying on money. And what I want to be able to do is to stop worrying about revenue at a certain point and focus more on the impact that I can have. So that work optional status is less of a, okay, I don't need to work anymore, now I can go hang out on the beach, and more of a, I don't need to work for revenue now. Now I can switch and turn it over 100% to impact. Now I'm going to argue that I think you should do that earlier before you actually hit that freedom number. We can find a certain point where we can start to afford to do that. It doesn't have to be once we hit that big freedom number, but that is more of what it is. It's a matter of what am I working for now?
Yeah, I think that makes sense because I like approaching it from both angles because let's be honest, like it's 20-somethings that are listening to this podcast. They might not be able to just immediately step into their dream job. It's not as easy as just saying like, stop doing the thing you hate and just start doing the thing you love. Like that's such like cliche advice and like not helpful advice in some sense because I have many friends that are like, yes, I would love to be a full-time painter or a yoga instructor or an actor or whatever. All of these jobs that like, they take a little bit of runway to actually A, get good at, and then therefore B, actually pay enough that it would suffice or sustain your ideal lifestyle. It's kind of nice to actually be working towards FIRE, I think, and realizing, cool, like I've covered 50% of my FI number or, 75% of it. And now money can kind of start taking a back seat and impact or passion or purpose can kind of start jumping in the driver's seat and really, driving your career in whatever direction you really want to. And you still don't have to have that lingering anxiety behind you about money because let's be honest, like it's got to be there, like if it is actually an issue.
Yeah, it goes along with my personality type in that in order for me to take risk, I need to know that there's something there that can catch me. Now, there's a lot of people out there in their 20s who are comfortable taking risk even without that foundation, without, a cash cushion or knowing that they're set up for retirement. I wish I was that person. I'm not. If I could go back and tell myself something in my early 20s, I would tell myself to try to take a little bit more risk, worry a little bit less about like retirement savings. But I also have found that my personality type can go in the direction of taking more risk and jump into entrepreneurship. We just have to go about it in a little bit of a different way. And for me, that was spending a good 3-4 years saving 50 to 60% of my income and knowing, okay, now I can take a lot of risk because I did so much at the front end to take care of myself that if I need to stop saving for a few years, I can afford to do that. And that's actually where my favorite metric from FIRE comes into play. That is Coast FI. So this is where you've reached the point that you've saved and invested enough money that if you don't save or invest another dollar, that lump sum of money should grow and carry you to a retirement age. For some people, maybe that's 65 or 50, whatever age you decide on. And now you just have to cover your living expenses. So one benefit of really saving and investing early on is that you can hit that number and now you know, all right, it's just about living expenses, and that will allow you to take more risk. And since hitting that number, it has been a lot easier for me to invest more to the business and to take bigger swings.
Wait, can you kind of walk through Coast Fire, maybe with some numbers, either your own or just some nice round numbers to make it a little bit easier? Kind of how you figure out when you have reached Coast Fire?
Well, let's talk about the financial freedom number. And this is just simple math. People in the finance community love to argue about this, but what you can do is take living expenses, multiply that by 25, and then there's your freedom number. So if we say today we have 400,000 saved, your freedom number is 2 million, and then we're assuming an 8% return. So that 400,000 is not just sitting there in cash, it's getting invested. That's a very important part of this so that it can grow. We hit that 2 million in 20 years. So meaning if you're 25 and you already have 400,000 saved, that's really impressive. It's probably unrealistic age for this, but that you'd get to that 2 million by age 40. So that money, without you putting another dollar into it, is now going to grow and get to your freedom number just on its own. And then if you say, well, 50, then that number is going to continue to grow as long as, we don't start withdrawing from it. So that's what I mean. And I think that's one really good argument for in your 20s, saving and investing quite a bit. Now, there is a balance that we have to strike, but I love that Coast FI metric. Most people aren't going to hit it at 25. It might be something like 30, 32 that you could hit it if you're being a really diligent investor. But it's such a powerful mindset shift once you've hit that, because now you know that's taken care of. Retirement, we can check that off. And now we're just covering living expenses.
I love that train of thinking. It's almost like front loading the sacrifice too. It's like, let's do the hard work for, sometimes it might only take 5 to 8 years to like build up enough of a nest egg that you can let sit for 20, 25 years until you would hit traditional retirement age, and it will grow and it would sustain you all kind of post-retirement. And I love that because I'm like you too. I'm a checkbox guy. Like, I'd love to be like, all right, this is a project I need to do or I need to think about at some point in time. I'd get it done and then I can move on to my other life. And especially if somebody is aggressively saving early in their 20s, you have like 2 things working for you. First, like your income is growing. So it's like getting easier and easier to save more and more. And of course, you're also like probably putting away a ton of money so that whenever you want to start backing off of your investing strategy because you have reached Coast Fire, you're still continuing to make more money. And now you're getting to utilize some of the money that you were investing for retirement into different areas of your life. So it's like, shoot, like I'm making the most amount of money I've ever made, and I'm getting like $10, $20, $30,000 back every single year because I no longer need to invest that in retirement. Like, what opportunity does that provide you? Like, maybe you could now switch careers. Like, you were, a high-paying software developer and you're burnt out on that, and you do want to go explore this passion or hobby that you had and try to turn it into a career. And well, I live off of $35,000 or $40,000. Like, I know all I need to do is actually make that amount of money to cover my living expenses, and I don't have to be stressed about planning or saving or investing for retirement because I already checked that box. I got it covered. Let's talk a little bit more about like the ideal state. Like, okay, I am somebody that's like, cool, I want to get this retirement planning thing done, or at least like reach Coast FI, because I am probably thinking about some career changes or lifestyle changes in my 30s or 40s. What if I like don't actually really know what post Coast FI life would look like? Like, are there some questions that you ask your clients to like help them think about their actual life that they would like to live, like post-retirement, let it be in your 30s, 40s, 60s, 70s, 90s, or beyond?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things to do with clients because we go through this exercise of asking several different questions, and it reveals a lot of important things that they might not have even been aware of. So one of my favorite questions is, what does an ideal day look like to you? And I actually have them walk me through, like, you wake up and what do you do and what do you eat? And it's almost a method of working backwards for financial goals. So we can figure out what your ideal life costs. And I think what surprises a lot of people is that what's important to them and what they want to do every day is not as expensive as they might think. But something we hone in on is that work aspect of the day. How many hours do you work during the day? Where do you work? How do you work? Are you in meetings? Are you doing podcasts? Are you writing? What if you could pick this ideal day, what would that look like? And so from a career perspective, they can start to work backwards and say, I'd really like to work 3 to 4 hours of deep work where I'm really not interrupted, nobody's talking to me. And then they realize that right now they're spending their entire day in meetings. So it's what type of career shift or what could I do that could allow me to get to that type of work? It doesn't have to be entrepreneurship. You could stay in your same industry, but try a different role. So that's something that a lot of them are surprised to think through. Or they've never taken the time to think through that. And then some of the other questions I like to ask are, what experiences do you want to have? So these are like the one-off things, vacations, but maybe running a marathon, some of these other goals that maybe aren't even career related. But I also like to ask, what are things that you see other people chasing that you don't care about? Because I think it's important too to cross off what we don't want. Because otherwise, if we kind of operate on default, we start going after things that we realize eventually aren't even important to us. So there's a lot of people who are like, I don't really get the fancy car thing. Like I thought maybe in a few years I'd upgrade and get a BMW or something like that, but I don't really care. I don't think that actually impacts my life. So it's important to, one, figure out what you want, but then two, figure out what do I not care about or what do I think will not add to my daily life.
Yeah, I've heard you walk through this exercise before, and it had me thinking, and I started like writing down some notes for myself too. And it was like crazy how my ideal day like isn't really that far away from what I'm currently doing.
Right.
And it honestly isn't really that much more expensive, maybe even less expensive than my current day is too. So like in terms of financial impact, I don't think it's going to like change a whole lot. There are just like a few things in my life that I would like to do less of. And there are some things that I would love to do more of. Like from just like a day-to-day standpoint, I would love to just be outside, be able to garden, be able to piddle around in my yard way more often than I currently do. Like my Sunday kind of like resembles one of my ideal days. Like do I want that all of the time? No, but like there are aspects of my weekend that I'm like, ooh, like I would love to just go for a slow walk or like a chat with my girlfriends, like at any point in time throughout the day. But sometimes on the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, like meetings stack, things get busy. You're like scrambling in between meetings to like, finish up small to-do items, things like that. I just like want to slow down a little bit and give myself a little bit more white space throughout my week to enjoy some of the little things. But yeah. I loved also the experience aspect too. Cause like, I was like, I've been challenged on this many, many years ago before too, whenever I start getting excited about financial independence or FIRE. And the inevitable question is always like, okay, well, Justin, you're telling me by 39 and a half, you're going to hit, FIRE or whatever. Like, what are you going to do with your life after that? And that was like an oversimplification or kind of like straw man argument to this. But there also was a little bit of truth that I wanted to explore in it. And I'm like, oh, like, yes, I kind of have a good understanding of what my ideal day would look like and the work that I'd like to be doing kind of at that point in time. But like, what else do I want to do? Like, what do I want to spend seasons of the next part of my life really invested in? And I started like essentially like a FIRE bucket list, like things that I would do kind of post FIRE. And like some are silly, like read all the Harry Potter books. Like, like I just like don't have the bandwidth for it right now. I don't want to do it. But I'm like, I think that would be kind of fun to do one year where I just like sit down and read all of the books. And some are like a little bit more aspirational to an extent that it might need a lot of like focus and energy at that point in time. But I love these exercises, for kind of idolizing your ideal day. But also I love them because it always begs the question, like, how can I start doing some of that now too? Like, what can I do? And this whole concept of coast FIRE too, the closer and closer I get to, I don't know, my ideal coast FIRE number. Like if I'm benchmarking it off of 59 and a half, like I'm at coast FIRE right now, but like, I don't know if I want to hit FIRE by 59 and a half. So like, am I actually in coast FIRE right now? I don't know. But yeah, there are some things that I'm like, cool. Like, how do I get more of this? How do I deploy some money to free up some time to do more of these things that I already have on my list? in kind of my current life right now. Because I turned 30 this year, and it's like, all right,
Me
I got to
too.
start actually like
We're both there.
thinking through this.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, what I find really interesting, and you mentioned this too, is a lot of times we ask, okay, what are you going to do? How is your day going to change? What are you going to add? But a lot of people who I really respect they've been really successful entrepreneurs or just great thinkers. What they do with more freedom is they do less and they just have more space. So a lot of what I have thought about what I want to do with my own life is to have more unscheduled time and to give myself more space to think, to do nothing. The act of doing nothing is really underrated and something we don't do at all anymore. So I really value deep thinking and spending time to make sure that I'm not distracted and I'm not picking up my phone, every second for a distraction. And a lot of people who have also achieved quite a bit schedule this or unschedule it into their calendar where they have just hours of uninterrupted time to think. Not Steve Jobs. Bill Gates has a think week. Warren Buffett says he spends most of his day reading and thinking. And these are people who have been really successful, so they understand the importance of thinking, but also just from a daily happiness and fulfillment standpoint, I think this could add a lot to our lives to get to that freedom and get to that ideal day, the day where we get to own it, and not fill it up automatically, to leave time there.
I'm such a planner, so the thought of that just like both excites me and terrifies me all in one. But it's like one of my biggest things right now that I'd love to be able to do more of, would just be able to say yes to spontaneity. Like my girlfriend lives a rock star life. She's a concert photographer. She's on the road all of the time. And she's just like routinely inviting me, like she's doing a tour over in Europe. And she's like, hey, you want to meet me in London for a couple of days? And it's like, the planner in me is like, whoa, that's like 2 weeks away. I really need to think through that. How am I going to rearrange things?
For this?
Yeah. But part of me is like, man, I wish I just like had so much white space and unplanned time where like that's an easy yes right away. Where I'm just like, you know what? Yeah, probably. Like let me try to find a flight, and I just go there and I just kind of see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think I got really into investing. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. I'm in finance. I've always been in finance, but you'll be surprised how many people are advisors or just in finance and they don't take their own personal finances very seriously, or they don't save and invest. It's shocking. So the career is only one aspect of why I became so interested in saving and investing. But the other aspect of it was buying back my time. So I saw when I made that shift to, okay, I have a paycheck. I can either buy things that lose value, consumer goods. I could buy clothes or a car or whatever it might be, or I could buy assets. And every time I buy an asset or I invest, I am buying a little bit more of my time back. And I think it's important to understand that that's the trade-off. I'm not anti-luxury car or nice things. It's more of just understand what's happening when you buy the luxury car or the nice clothes, is that you are giving up a little bit more of your time because now you need that paycheck still. So when I started to think about money in terms of my schedule and how I wanted to control my schedule, it made it way more motivating for me to take that money and start investing it, because I saw it as I'm slowly taking control of my schedule. And that's why I think that exercise of what does your ideal day look like is so important, because rather than being like, I want $2 million for the sake of $2 million, it's more like you're working towards that ideal day, that ideal life. Now, no life is perfect, but ownership and a sense of control over your schedule is highly correlated with human happiness. They've shown that. So I think it's important to understand what is happening when you buy something versus invest the money.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's continue to explore this thread a little bit more, because I am curious, especially like you're my spirit animal. Whenever I was like listening to you on podcasts, I was like, oh my gosh, me too. Especially whenever you talked around, the scarcity mindset and just like struggle with spending. And it seems like that shift has been changing for you. Like you have become more and more comfortable spending. Maybe it's because you've kind of really stepped into entrepreneurship, and I don't want to speak for you, but like stepping into entrepreneurship for me too kind of opened up a lot, because you got to spend on more things. Like you got to buy software, you got to hire contractors or employees. Like there's just things that you're spending money on that just like this whole world of entrepreneurs is always kind of telling you. So you get a little bit more comfortable with spending, but also I don't know if it's similar, but I got confident in myself and making money too. So like I'm like, wow, like I never really had the ownership or felt like a skill set of mine was the capability of making money. But whenever you become an entrepreneur, you're like, yeah, I'm spending this money, but I know I can make that amount of money, or I'll get this time back right now. And I know it will turn into probably even more money. So just kind of opening up the conversation around scarcity mindset and kind of what's changed for you. How have you become more comfortable with spending?
Yeah, you brought up such an important point where you start to, for me, it was starting to trust myself more. You jump into entrepreneurship, you leave a 9 to 5, and now you're working for yourself, and you haven't exactly proven to yourself yet that you can do this. But with each, month or year that passes to where you see that your revenue is increasing, that you are profitable at a certain point, you do start to trust yourself and the skill set of making money. Because I 100% believe it is a skill that you can work to acquire. And I think in the beginning, especially before entrepreneurship, I just didn't fully trust myself. I didn't know yet if it was something that I could figure out. Now, if I spend money, and if I spend money on something that I know will lose value or has no value, like a vacation, I just trust myself that I can make that money back and then some. And it's this exercise of thinking to the future and wondering, is this expense today really going to impact me in 20 years? Is this really going to throw off everything? And it's not. So it's almost like bringing things back into reality. And being a financial planner, being somebody who can run these numbers, I can do that rather than just saying something like, I can't afford that. There's no way I can spend money on that. It's actually the practice of, okay, let's say we do this. We go on this $2,000 vacation. What does that actually do to your FI goals? And it doesn't have as large of an impact as you might think. Now, we're in this strange category of people who have an oversaving problem rather than overspending. I know that's not always relatable, but I am seeing it more and more, especially with people in the FIRE movement. That's why I like to talk about it, because with a lot of my clients, I see that they struggle with this too. They're doing so well and they can start spending at any point. And seeing clients who I had and I still have that could afford to do this, but were thinking a bit irrationally about it and had that scarcity mindset, did make me reflect on my own spending and realize how irrational I was being. And because I can look at somebody else's situation very objectively, but when we had this scarcity mindset, we're not being objective, we're not being logical, we're letting a lot of fear creep in and make those decisions for us. So I like to bring numbers to it and just challenge that fear. But it's a slow process. You're not going to wake up one day and be able to drop $5,000 just on anything. It's starting to, take that weekend trip or buy those plants that you really want. If it's starting to just get used to that and then realizing like the world didn't fall apart after I spent some money. And it's a slow process.
Rachel, speaking my love language, plants is like the only thing that I just like swipe. Whoops. What did I just do? My girlfriend's like, man, you don't spend money on anything besides your plants, and you will not hesitate a second to buy new fertilizer or soil or a new plant that you see. I'm like, all right, yeah, you're right. But maybe on that vein too, are there any rules that you've set for yourself that help you with spending? I know that feels kind of funny with me even asking that question or saying that question. Like, why do you need to put rules on yourself for spending? But I have a gut feeling that you might actually do some of this. As somebody, like I said, my spirit animal, rules really actually help.
Yeah, well, it's more like kind of these big picture rules where it's never hesitate to spend on your health, never hesitate to spend on, good food. There are certain things that I almost see as an investment. So you could look at, fast food, for example, and say, well, that's really cheap compared to chicken breast and rice or whatever. I eat better food than that. Just an example. But in the long term, the fast food will negatively impact my health and then have health costs and things like that. So I'm a little bit more able to spend on health expenses, healthier food, gym memberships, things like that, because I actually have switched it. and I see it as an investment. But you can do this with like vacation as well. And actually, Bill Perkins talks about this in Die with Zero, where he says if you go take that vacation, you're actually creating these memory dividends. So for the rest of your life, you can look back at that vacation and you'll have memories to think through and great times to remember. And that's an investment in and of itself too. We have to make sure we are taking care of the money investments as well. We can't just go all health, all vacation investments. But for somebody who struggles, I think it's really helpful to switch it a little bit and say, okay, how could this be an investment? An experience is an investment because I have those memories that I'll remember, and he calls them memory dividends to liken it to investments. But health expenses, that's an investment. I think it always helps to just zoom all the way out. So if you're out with your friends and you don't want to spend money on dinner or whatever, and you think to yourself, this is maybe a morbid exercise, but it's helped me, like on your deathbed. Am I going to wish I had stayed out with my friends and paid for this meal, or am I going to wish I went home and saved that $25 or whatever it is? And to me, that's a clear answer. And so if you can think about it in terms of that, while also balancing that, yes, we need to delay some gratification. That is very important because we have to take care of our future selves as well. It also can help anybody who struggles with delaying all gratification to make sure that you are enjoying some of the present day too.
Yeah, it's so true. And Die with Zero has come up so many times. I still don't know how I have not read that book yet.
So good.
I know. I just need to put it in my cart and order it already, which maybe comes back to a couple of rules I do. One rule that I've implemented recently is like, if it's under $20 and you're thinking about buying it, just buy it. I trust myself enough that I'm not like spending on things that I really don't want. I'm kind of a minimalist at heart to an extent, but Die with Zero, I'm guessing it's probably like $15 to $20 on Amazon right now. It'll probably be one of those things where like, if I thought about buying it, just buy it for yourself.
Yeah.
And one other rule that I've recently implemented too is not giving second thoughts on supporting friends. So like a recent example of mine is a friend of mine launched a book, went on Amazon, just bought the book, didn't even actually look at the price. Like, come on, Justin. Like over the whole course of the year last year, I think I spent like $400 on quote, quote, supporting my friends. Like that's not going to put a dent in my, FI journey or path. That just makes someone's day too. Like to come through on book launch day, have a order already in the cart, I know how much that is from a content creator perspective, from a friend perspective to show up. And I just don't want money to ever get in the way of me supporting a friend.
I think that's great. That's something I've been thinking a lot about too. We talk about money and financial freedom, and it's a little bit self-centered in that we're like, I want to control my day or own my schedule. But another benefit of having money is that you can help other people. And I really started to think about this more because we've had some family members who've gotten to some tough situations, and I was able to help a bit. I've never had a better feeling than being able to do that. And it only motivated me to make more money because I understand that not everyone has the skill set, or maybe they just didn't have the right life path to make a lot of money. And I'm somebody who does. So I would love to be in that position to where I can help other people take some stress off their plate, especially, family and friends. It's just a great feeling. Your rule of the $20 made me think, Nick, I always say his last name wrong, but Julie, he wrote Of Dollars and Data, great Twitter account. He has a rule where if anything is 1% or less of your net worth, don't hesitate and don't overthink it. Just buy it. So that's probably a little bit bigger than $20 for some people.
Yeah.
But it made me think of it. So I translated that to a dollar amount for myself, and I've kept that top of mind.
That's so interesting. I think that's another great rule. Mm-hmm. Rachel, let's close up with maybe, I don't know if we can really rapid fire these, but kind of a segment on just explain that tweet. So you're super active on Twitter, and there's a lot of great thoughts that are out there, but maybe there's some nuance or some more conversation that needs to be had in some of these tweets, or I just kind of want to hear you talk about them a little bit more because it was so good. So I'm hoping I could throw a couple of tweets out at you, and you just give me a little more explanation or line of thinking of, what you were thinking through whenever you wrote that tweet. Is that fair?
Sure. Sounds good.
Okay. I like this one. And most of these are from like the last 30 days. So I try to grab a few that were pretty relevant or maybe top of mind for you. But I was curious on this one. my favorite strategy for achieving anything, and then you have : outlast. What did you mean by that?
I actually love this topic. So, and if there's something I wish I could tell myself when I was younger, this would be a key point that I would make. I believe that one of the reasons a lot of people struggle or fail at something is that they don't give themselves a long enough time horizon. So when I want to try something new, I assign a time horizon to it. For Twitter, when I started off, I said, I'm going to try Twitter and to create that following there, to grow that account for 1 year. I'm not allowed to question it. I'm not allowed to analyze it. I'm not allowed to drop it until that year is up. So after 1 year, if I say, hey, this isn't working, I'm not enjoying it, then I can drop it. And I do that with all new platforms that I'm on. I have a time horizon that I give it. Now, as far as that's like an input goal, but I also like to think about the results. And again, this is something where I think people struggle because they expect the results too quickly. But if you can make that separation from the input to the result and make it as long as you possibly can, you're giving yourself such a higher chance of success to say, hey, I'm going to work on this input for 1, 2, sometimes a decade. I have decade goals too. And content's a big part of that, where I don't really expect to see massive results from content or from investment for a decade. And not enough people are able to assign that time horizon, but think about it in terms of something that's, we're going to wait that long for the results. But the best entrepreneurs, the best thinkers that I have seen, they have all done this. So that's something I've adopted as well.
Love that. Great answer. What about this one? People in their 20s should take way more risk. If you fail, you have so much time to recover. You increase your skill set, and worst case scenario is really not that bad. Yeah. I think this is probably very timely for A, this audience, but B, for probably the thread that we were talking about in earlier conversation. But can you extrapolate or explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, honestly, since I'm coming out of my 20s, I'm the same. I'm turning 30 this year, and I'm looking back on it. I'm reflecting quite a bit. It made me realize how much I could afford to take risk in this decade, and how I wish I almost would have taken a little bit more. And I have the benefit of working with clients at all different ages. So I had, in the beginning of my career, worked with a lot of retirees. So I have the benefit of kind of seeing their life cycle and seeing everything that happened. And what I've really realized is that your 20s, most people don't even start saving and investing in their 20s. Most people don't make much progress towards buying assets. So I really think your 20s is a time where you could take so much risk, and you should take so much risk. And what inspired that tweet is that I saw so many people in their 20s being too conservative, because you have so much time to recover. You can completely fail and burn out in your 20s, and you have so much time to recover. Now, some people in their 20s might have dependents. Not everybody has this luxury, but for a lot of us who don't have dependents or responsibilities, this is the time to really just go for it. And I really think it's a net positive no matter what happens, because even if you were to fail, if you try entrepreneurship or try a side hustle and you fail, you have a ton of skill sets now that can be valuable in a lot of different careers. So that's what I think about for myself. The amount of skills that I've learned just in a few years of entrepreneurship is outrageous. And if I ever had to go back into the job market, I think now I could earn a much higher income than I did previously. So that's why I see it as such a low risk thing, really, when we think about how much time we have to recover, and that the worst case scenario is just not that bad.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's really hard, and definitely a reflection that I've had too. Like, I really wish I took way more risk in my 20s. I had the energy, I had the time. The reputational risk isn't even really that relevant either. You have so much opportunity to just do whatever you want, and people are going to be like, yeah, they're in their 20s, who cares, like, kind of thing. So yes, I really do wish we were, as a society, a little more empowered to do some of that. And maybe there's some reprogramming that should be happening as people kind of go through college to really look at their 20s as an opportunity to explore and to, it doesn't have to be quote, quote, take risk, but just like, don't be so fixated on future outcome. Like, kind of live a little bit more in the current moment and trust yourself that you'll be able to take care of yourself, even if you start at, if we're talking financially, start at zero in your 30s for your net worth. Like, you still have so much time to build wealth and to get to financial independence, you know. And you're right. Like, if I, for some reason, lost all my wealth and started at zero again, I promise you, I am very, very confident that I would make up that wealth in a way faster timeline than whenever I initially started out building my wealth now, because of the skill set and the mindset that I have. It could be entrepreneurship. It could be my W-2. Like, it doesn't matter. Either direction, I feel very more confident in being able to take care of my future self now.
Absolutely. Completely agree.
Let's finish up with one more, maybe a little bit more tactical here, but a recent tweet of yours. Hoarding cash is one of the most common mistakes I see. What did you mean by that?
So when I have a new client work with me, I look at everything, of course. And one thing I notice over and over again is that they hold so much in cash. And this recent change in interest rates where we're actually getting a decent amount on cash is creating more of a problem. So it's great that our cash is earning something now. That's not a reason to hold more in cash, because over the long term, investment, stock market, yourself, whatever, however you invest, should beat that cash return. And so there's always that opportunity cost that we have to think through. And I know some people who are just a bit more risk adverse and they hold more in cash. That's fine. You can do that. But I see people who hold, I mean, they might have 3 to 4 years of an emergency fund just sitting there in cash. And it just kills me because I'm thinking, what could that be earning if it were invested? And so it's a small thing, but a big thing in the long term, where we should take our cash and we should put it to work in some way. And don't let the attractive interest rates that we have right now lure you in too much. You should not be taking long-term money and having it sit in a cash account. Those two don't belong together. So that's the mistake I see quite a bit. And it's that opportunity cost that kills me.
Yeah, and I shortchanged your tweet there. I think you followed up with like, create a plan for your cash. And there was like kind of 3 bullets there around, you know, emergency funds, short-term savings goals. And I can't remember, there was one more that kind of followed up on there. There is reason to be not hoarding cash, but to be saving cash for certain situations. But you're right. I do think people need to think through their cash flow kind of system or model. Like, I get this paycheck, it hits this account, it goes here, it maybe pays bills right away. Some of this is funding an emergency fund. Some of this maybe be funding a savings account. But like, all the excess cash, what do I do with it? And just setting up a system for it. And more times than not, investing in some kind of asset, if it's, you know, real estate or stocks or whatever, is probably the right place to be, quote, quote, hoarding your long-term cash.
Yeah, I mean, you made an important point. Cash is important. I'm not advocating for keeping nothing in cash. You should have that emergency fund, especially if you're a business owner. You really need that. You should keep things in cash if it's a short-term goal. Stock market is too risky for short-term money. But once you've taken care of that, once you've got the emergency fund, the short-term or medium-term goals, then the excess should be put to work in a better way.
Definitely. Rachel, this has been a blast. I would love to point people towards other platforms they can consume your content. You have a podcast out there that I'd love for you to plug, but also you're active on YouTube now too.
Yeah.
So if people want to go consume over there, do you mind plugging your podcast and your YouTube for us?
Absolutely. So YouTube is Camp Wealth. That's CAMP. It's my last name, Wealth. And then the podcast is with my co-host, Matt Garisick. We're both financial advisors. We're both CFPs as well. And it's called Becoming Work Optional. So it's just about exploring a lot of what we talked about in this podcast of how to get there. What does it look like? What do you have to give up to get there? And the why behind it as well.
Cool. Rachel, let's close things out. Final question for you. If you had the opportunity to teach a 16-week class to a group of graduating college seniors on a topic that isn't normally covered in the classroom, what would you teach and how would you teach it?
Yeah, I think about this a lot, honestly, because I think about what do I wish I would have known in college or been prepared with before I set out. And honestly, a lot of the themes that we have been talking about here is exactly what I would teach. It would be about the concept of creating a life where you're working towards becoming work optional, but you're really getting closer to that ideal day and figuring out what that looks like for you. I definitely would teach the process of, in the beginning, we don't have to jump into entrepreneurship, but you should go somewhere where you think you can learn. And I'm a huge advocate for finding the job where you think you can acquire the most skills and learn the most from that job. So not a matter of where can I earn the most income, but what job will set me up with the largest skill set that I can transfer to other areas. And I think we don't think through that. We think too much about the money. But then after that, it would be the concept of exponential growth and how that affects every aspect of our life. It's more than just money, but it's also the way that we make money. It's creating an audience. That's exponential growth. That's leverage. Everything in life is exponential growth, and every path to success is a result of exponential growth. And not enough people understand compound interest or exponential growth. And I would spend a whole week just talking about that and making sure that, the college students understood how important it was, and then talking about leverage, but also making sure that it's almost, this might be meta, but teaching how to learn in a way. I think one of the most valuable skill sets that we can have is to pick up skills really quickly and understand how to get to important information really quickly. That's something that took me a few years to figure out. But now if I need to learn a new skill or I just need to learn a new topic, I can do it really quickly. And for any entrepreneur, I think every entrepreneur goes through that phase where they understand the importance of that and the adaptability you have to have when you start your own business. And being able to be adaptable is so, so important. So we don't spend enough time on learning how to learn or learning how to think. And these are really valuable skills that I think every college student could benefit from. I think if there's one thing I wish I could have tweaked a little bit about my education, it would be less memorization, but more of learning a concept, being able to turn around and teach it to somebody else. That's when you really understand the concept.
No doubt. Great answer. Once again, this is Rachael Camp. Go find her on podcast players at Becoming Work Optional, on YouTube, and I think actually a lot of her social handles, that's Camp Wealth. Rachael, it's been a blast. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. I had such a great time. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the episode. As always, I appreciate your kind words. If you want to leave us a rating and review on your podcast player right now, that would absolutely make my day. If you want to find episode show notes, our blog, and other great resources, head over to tsirpodcast.com. If you have follow-up questions, an idea for a future episode, or just want to say hi, we have a contact form on our website, and those messages go straight into my inbox, and I promise you, I will reply. But all right, guys, I really appreciate you tuning in. I love you all, and you're not alone. Let's keep making it through our struggles together.